Daniel Harris felt as though his shirt collar was closing in on him, even though the hotel lobby's air conditioning hummed along at its usual steady pace. He was 40 years old, the manager of the Fairmont Grand in downtown Phoenix, and for nearly a decade he'd taken pride in keeping his composure no matter the situation. But tonight, that composure had slipped straight through his fingers. The reason stood right in front of him: Victor Duval, a French millionaire known both for his extravagant demands and his short temper. His shoes shone like glass, his suit looked freshly tailored in Paris, and his sharp accent spilled out in a rush of rapid French Daniel couldn't make sense of. "Excuses-moi, monsieur, ma chambre, réservation spéciale," Victor pressed, his voice just loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests. Daniel's thoughts scrambled. He'd taken a semester of French in college, but all he could dredge up were the simplest words: bonjour, merci. He tried anyway. Bonjour, monsieur, chamber, yes, we have. His voice cracked as he motioned vaguely toward the reception desk, praying his words might somehow stick. They didn't. Victor frowned, impatience written clearly across his face. He repeated his request even faster, his irritation sharp as a blade. Daniel felt heat climbing the back of his neck. Guests began to notice. A family from Dallas, surrounded by towers of luggage, turned their heads. Two women in business suits sipping coffee by the window stopped mid-sip to watch. The front desk clerks froze in place, pretending to work while sneaking nervous glances. Daniel's heart thundered. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was terrified. The Fairmont Grand had recently been purchased by a new chain, and upper management had warned him, this is a transition period. We expect perfection, no mistakes. One fumbled VIP could sink his career. Unbelievable, Daniel muttered under his breath, wiping his damp palms against his slacks. He forced a stiff smile. Monsieur, one moment please, just one moment. He turned toward his assistant manager, who hovered nearby, looking just as panicked. You know any French? Daniel whispered. The assistant shook his head. Nothing more than what you just said. Victor's eyebrows shot up. Vous comprenez? Non? C'est ridicule? He snapped, slicing the air with his hand in frustration. Daniel's stomach churned. The lobby no longer felt like a lobby, it felt like a stage, every pair of eyes fixed on him as he failed in real time before one of the most important guests he'd ever hosted. His hands twitched helplessly. For a split second, he imagined this ending with him boxing up his office. Ah, monsieur. He stammered again, his voice cracking with desperation. And then, as if the universe had decided to save him, a calm voice cut through the tension in perfect, fluid French. Bonsoir, Monsieur Duval. Vous devez être fatigué après un assez long voyage. Permettez-moi de vous aider. The words shattered the heavy silence like glass breaking. Heads turned. Standing near one of the brass pillars, a rag still in her hand, was Emily Carter. She was 24, dressed in the plain maid's uniform, and until that moment had been invisible to Daniel and nearly everyone else in the lobby. But her voice carried a confidence and grace that commanded attention. Her French was effortless, not the clumsy kind from a travel guide, but the fluent rhythm of someone raised in it. Victor's frustration stopped cold. He turned toward her, his interest replacing irritation. Ah, enfin! Quelqu'un qui parle ma langue. Emily set down her rag, walked toward him with calm assurance, and continued. Votre réservation est prête. Si vous avez de demandes particulières, je vais m'en assurer personnellement. Daniel's jaw went slack. He blinked, momentarily forgetting to breathe. His embarrassment doubled as the scene flipped. The same millionaire who had dismissed him seconds ago now smiled warmly at the maid. Around the lobby, guests whispered. A few even grinned at the unexpected turn. Victor leaned toward Emily, speaking quickly, his tone softening into something closer to charm. Emily nodded, answering just as easily. Their exchange flowed naturally, like two musicians improvising in harmony. Daniel shrank in on himself. The Dallas family watched Emily with admiration. Their kids whispered in awe. The businesswomen abandoned their coffee entirely, now fully tuned in. Even the front desk clerks seemed to relax, hiding small smiles behind their hands. When Emily finally ended the conversation with a respectful nod, she switched into English. Monsieur Duval, if you'll follow me, I'll take you to your suite. Everything has been prepared. Victor beamed. Parfait. Merci, mademoiselle. And just like that, Emily led the millionaire across the polished marble floor, her steps steady and composed. The energy in the lobby shifted immediately, lighter, calmer, controlled. Daniel stood frozen, humiliation and awe tangled inside him. He had managed the hotel for years, but in a matter of minutes Emily had displayed more authority than he had in a decade. He swallowed hard, straightening his shoulders as if trying to salvage some dignity, but the thought burned hotter than the shame. Who exactly was Emily Carter? When the elevator doors slid closed behind Emily and Victor, the lobby burst into hushed whispers. Guests leaned toward each other. Staff exchanged wide-eyed glances. Daniel forced out a weak laugh, trying to pretend he was still in control, but everyone knew the truth. It wasn't him who had rescued the hotel tonight. It was the maid. He hurried toward the front desk, pretending to bury himself in paperwork. His assistant, both nervous and impressed, muttered, "Did you know she spoke French like that?" Daniel's head snapped up. "Of course," he lied, his ears hot. In reality, he had no idea. Emily had been at the Fairmont Grand for a little over a year. She'd slipped onto the staff quietly, caused no trouble, never showed up late. She was the kind of employee you hardly noticed, until tonight. Minutes dragged by as Daniel pretended to focus on tasks, but his mind replayed her voice, her posture, the way she seemed to command the room with nothing more than a sentence. He envied her ease. Worse, he felt threatened by it. Half an hour later, Emily returned alone, still composed, her uniform neat, her hair tied back with precision. Daniel stepped forward, trying to hide his unease. "Emily," he said tightly. "A word, please." She stopped, looking him square in the eye. Not arrogant, just calm. "Yes, Mr. Harris?" He motioned her toward a quieter corner near the windows overlooking Jefferson Street. Lowering his voice, he asked, "Since when do you speak French?" Her answer was plain, almost casual. "Since I was a kid. My mom worked as a translator in San Diego. She taught me." Daniel blinked. He hadn't expected something so simple. "You never mentioned it." "You never asked?" Emily replied, her tone even, not defensive, just honest. Daniel's jaw tensed, though he quickly loosened it. "Why didn't you tell anyone? That's a valuable skill." Emily tilted her head, as if considering. "I came here to work, not to brag. I needed the job. I didn't think speaking French mattered if I was scrubbing floors." Her words stung. Daniel tugged at his tie, suddenly uncomfortable. "Well, tonight it mattered a great deal." Emily said nothing, her calm gaze holding steady. "Thank you for stepping in." "Mr. Duval seemed satisfied," Daniel added stiffly. She nodded once. "He was. He asked if the hotel had other staff who spoke different languages. I told him not many." The remark hit like a punch. Daniel forced a smile, but his chest tightened. Now the millionaire knew the maid spoke French while the manager did not. The imbalance gnawed at him. Before he could reply, a booming voice echoed across the lobby. "Mademoiselle Carter!" Victor was striding toward them again, a leather case in hand, his expression bright. He looked like a man who had just discovered a treasure. Emily turned smoothly, greeting him once more in French. "Monsieur Duval, avez-vous trouvé votre suite à votre goût?" Victor chuckled, his tone light. "Parfait. Absolument parfait. Mais je dois vous dire, mademoiselle, votre français est remarquable." Daniel caught enough to understand. Victor was praising her, calling her remarkable. Emily answered modestly. "Merci. C'est la langue de ma mère. J'ai toujours aimé la parler." Victor leaned in, conspiratorial. "You must have dinner with me tonight." "I insist." I cannot speak English here, it is too frustrating. But with you? Enfin, I can breathe. Emily blinked, startled, and politely switched back to English so Daniel could follow. Monsieur Duval, that is very kind, but I. Victor cut her off, warm and insistent. No, no, no. I won't take no for an answer. You saved me tonight. At least allow me to show gratitude. Emily hesitated, her eyes flicking briefly toward Daniel. For just a second, their gazes locked. Daniel's chest tightened. Jealousy and disbelief swirled together like a storm. His maid, the one he had barely noticed, was being invited to dine with a French millionaire in his own hotel. Daniel forced a smile. Of course, Emily. You should accept. It would reflect well on the hotel. The words tasted bitter, but refusing wasn't an option. Emily's face revealed little, but she inclined her head. Very well, Monsieur Duval. I will join you. Victor clapped his hands once, delighted. Parfait. We meet at 8. I will wait in the restaurant. He gave Daniel a short bow before striding off. Silence lingered. Emily looked back at Daniel. Is that all right with you, Mr. Harris? Daniel swallowed. Yes. Of course. Just be professional. Her lips curved in the faintest smile. Always. She turned and walked away, her small figure moving across the vast lobby floor with ease. Daniel watched her go, his thoughts a whirlwind. He was the manager, but somehow tonight she had become the most important person in the building. And that dinner invitation was about to pull them all into something far more complicated than anyone expected. At the front desk, Daniel caught his own reflection in the polished counter. The stiff lines in his jaw, the wear under his eyes, it all revealed a man barely holding himself together. He had built his reputation as someone who anticipated problems before they began. Yet one guest and one maid had ripped that image apart in under an hour. He tried to focus on the usual routines, checking arrivals, confirming bookings, approving schedules, but every line blurred. His thoughts kept circling back to Emily, standing tall beside Victor, speaking with ease and grace, as if she were the one who truly belonged. In the company of a millionaire, Daniel's assistant manager murmured as he stepped closer. You doing all right? Daniel straightened, forcing himself to nod with composure. Fine. Just busy. But he wasn't fine. His pride had taken a hard hit, and deep down he knew it. In front of a lobby full of people, he had been reduced to nothing more than a spectator. Emily had done what he couldn't, and worse, she had done it without hesitation. At 7:30, Daniel glanced at the clock and remembered the dinner was only 30 minutes away. He tried to convince himself it didn't matter. A guest wanted company. Emily happened to be convenient. But in his gut, he knew that wasn't the truth. Victor had seen something in her that Daniel had overlooked for an entire year. When Emily reappeared in the staff hallway, she was no longer in her uniform. She wore a simple black dress, modest, yet undeniably elegant. Daniel felt another jolt of surprise. She didn't just clean well, apparently, she knew how to carry herself with style too. He stepped toward her, keeping his tone stiff. Emily, a word. She paused, adjusting the strap of her small handbag. Yes? I want you to remember this dinner is about professionalism, he said, trying to sound authoritative though insecurity edged his voice. You represent the Fairmont Grand tonight. Don't let Mr. Duval think it's anything else. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. I think I understand what professionalism means, Mr. Harris. Heat crept up Daniel's neck, but he pressed on. Just making sure. This is a delicate situation. He's a demanding guest. Don't let him get too comfortable with you. Her expression softened, but not in a way that reassured him. More like pity. Mr. Harris, I can handle myself. And I can handle French millionaires too, apparently. The words stung, though she hadn't said them cruelly. Daniel clenched his jaw, then forced out. Very well. Enjoy your dinner. Emily gave a small nod and walked toward the restaurant, leaving Daniel in the hallway, tangled in his emotions. From a discreet corner of the lobby, Daniel lingered, trying not to look like he was spying. Through the wide glass windows of the hotel restaurant, he could see Emily and Victor at a corner table. A bottle of wine glimmered between them. Their conversation seemed effortless, her smile easy, his laughter spilling faintly into the lobby. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. He saw it in their body language. The way Victor leaned in. The way Emily held his gaze. The rhythm between them that didn't need translation. His stomach twisted. A bellhop approached, breaking the spell. "Mr. Harris, do you need me to take care of luggage for the guests from Sky Harbor?" Daniel shook his head too quickly. "No, I'll handle it. Thank you." But his eyes slid back toward the restaurant window. For the first time, he wondered who Emily Carter really was. She wasn't just a maid who had slipped under his radar. She was fluent in French, she could dine with a millionaire as though she belonged at his table, and she carried herself with a confidence that came only from someone who knew her own worth, even if others didn't. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Had he been so blind? So wrapped up in uniforms and job titles that he'd missed the talent and intelligence right in front of him? Inside the restaurant, Emily laughed at something Victor said, her voice light and melodic. A few diners turned their heads, whispering, curious why a hotel maid was sitting with a man who looked like he owned half of Paris. Daniel suddenly imagined ownership hearing about this. What if they decided Emily was the true asset of the hotel? What if they began to question his leadership, his inability to recognize her skills? What if his position was the next thing they decided to cut? The thoughts pressed in until he turned away, retreating to his office. He shut the door behind him and sank heavily into his chair, staring at the framed certificate on the wall, Manager of Excellence, 2018. It felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. He pressed his palms against his face and whispered to himself, "She's just a maid. She's just a maid." But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they weren't true. Emily Carter was far more than that. And the longer the dinner stretched on, the more Daniel realized his world at the Fairmont Grand was tilting out of his control. The restaurant lights glowed warmly across crisp white tablecloths, lending the room an air of quiet elegance. At the far corner, near the glass windows that overlooked the Phoenix streets, Emily sat across from Victor. She carried herself with the same calm she had in the lobby, though inside, she felt the weight of being under so many curious eyes. Diners glanced, whispered, clearly wondering why a maid was dining with a man who exuded wealth and influence. Victor poured wine into her glass with practiced ease. "You speak French like a Parisian," he said in English now, his accent thick but clear. "Not like someone who learned it from books." Emily smiled faintly. "My mother insisted I speak it at home. She always said languages open doors. She was right, I guess." Victor lifted his glass. "To your mother, then, a wise woman." Emily hesitated, then touched her glass lightly to his. To her. Through the glass wall, Daniel stood half hidden by a tall plant. He pretended to adjust the placement of a vase, but his eyes kept drifting to their table. Every laugh Emily gave, every gesture Victor made felt like another blow to his chest. He told himself it wasn't jealousy, that he was simply ensuring professionalism. But deep down, jealousy and unease tangled into something he couldn't admit even to himself. At the table, Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Tell me, Emily. Why are you working as a maid? You have intelligence. You have languages. You have presence. A woman like you should not be polishing brass." Emily's eyes fell briefly. "It's not about what I should be doing. It's about what I had to do. I lost my scholarship during my 3rd year of college. My mom got sick. I needed steady work, so I took what I could. The Fairmont Grand was hiring." Victor's expression softened. "Ah, life. It can be cruel. But still, you carry yourself with dignity. That is rare." Emily gave a small shrug. "Dignity doesn't pay the bills. Cleaning rooms does. At least for now." Victor studied her for a long moment. "You underestimate yourself. With French like yours, I could place you in Paris tomorrow. There are companies desperate for bilingual talent. You'd have a future there. Emily chuckled lightly, shaking her head. Paris sounds nice. But my life is here. My mother still needs me. I'm not chasing dreams across the ocean when she's counting on me to be home every night. Victor raised his hands in surrender. Fair enough. But still, you are too modest. Tonight you saved me from humiliation. I owe you more than dinner. Emily leaned back, calm but firm. You don't owe me anything. I just did what needed to be done. Anyone else would have done the same. Victor laughed warmly. No, no, no. You give people too much credit. That manager of yours, what is his name, Harris? He nearly drowned in the lobby. Without you, I would have walked out. Emily pressed her lips together, choosing silence. Instead, she took a slow sip of her wine. Meanwhile, Daniel sat back in his office, unable to stay still. He paced the carpet, muttering under his breath. He had spent years perfecting his image as a man of authority. Yet here he was, invisible in his own hotel, sidelined while his maid entertained the very guest he was supposed to manage. More than once, he nearly picked up the phone to call the restaurant, to remind Emily of her professional boundaries. But each time he stopped himself. That would make him look desperate. Worse, it might cause ownership to question his judgment. Still, as 8:30 turned to 9, and then to 9:30, his frustration burned hotter. Emily wasn't just holding her own, she was thriving. And Victor looked charmed enough to forget Daniel even existed. Back in the restaurant, dessert arrived. Victor insisted she try the chef's signature soufflé. Emily laughed softly. You don't give people much chance to say no, do you? Victor leaned back with a grin. In my world, no is only the beginning of negotiation. Emily rolled her eyes playfully, then grew serious. I'm not someone looking for favors. If you're suggesting something beyond dinner, let's be clear, I'm not here for that. Victor lifted his hands again, his voice earnest. Mademoiselle, I respect you. This is not about seduction, it is about admiration. You have a gift, and it should not be hidden. Emily held his gaze for a moment, then nodded slowly. Good. I just needed to be sure. From where he lingered just outside the restaurant doors, Daniel felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had caught fragments of their exchange, enough to realize that Victor's tone was warm, sincere. Enough to know that Emily was drawing boundaries with a quiet strength Daniel himself had never mastered. As the evening drew to a close, Victor stood and kissed Emily's hand with an old-world grace. You were the best part of my arrival in Phoenix. Tomorrow, I will tell your management how extraordinary you are. Emily thanked him politely. But the words made Daniel's throat close. Management. That meant ownership. That meant the people above him would hear that Emily, the maid, was the one shining at the Fairmont Grand, not the manager. And that promise was about to put Daniel in a position where he'd have no choice but to face both his insecurities and Emily's hidden strength. The next morning, Daniel walked into the lobby with dark circles under his eyes. He had barely slept. Every time he closed them, he saw Emily sitting across from Victor, laughing, talking, commanding respect in a way he never had. What unsettled him most wasn't the millionaire's attention. It was how natural Emily had looked in that world. By mid-morning, the hotel buzzed with check-ins for a local business conference. Daniel threw himself into routine, shaking hands with corporate guests, directing bellhops, reminding clerks of procedures. But no matter how busy he kept, his thoughts circled back to the same problem. Ownership would eventually hear Victor's glowing praise for Emily. And when that happened, they'd start asking questions about Daniel's own competency. At 10 sharp, Victor swept into the lobby, bright and cheerful, asking for Emily by name. Daniel, pretending to review paperwork at the desk, froze. She's on shift, he muttered. Cleaning rooms? Victor waved a hand dismissively. Then fetch her. I wish to speak with her again. Daniel forced a smile, though his insides twisted. Of course, Monsieur Duval. Minutes later, Emily appeared, carrying her cleaning caddy. She looked a little out of place standing in the center of the marble lobby with her supplies, but her composure never wavered. Bonjour, Monsieur Duval. She greeted warmly. Victor grinned. Ah, mademoiselle. Last night was delightful. Tonight we continue, dinner again, yes? But not here. I want to show you the city. There is a French restaurant in Scottsdale, Café Monarch. I hear it is excellent. Emily hesitated, glancing toward Daniel. I don't know if I should. Daniel stepped in quickly. Mr. Duval, I assure you, our staff are very busy. Emily has her duties. Perhaps another staff member could accompany you. Victor's expression darkened. No. I asked for her. She is the only one who understands me properly. Surely you see the value for your hotel if I am satisfied. The words sliced Daniel like a blade. Victor wasn't requesting, he was demanding. And Daniel knew he couldn't afford to refuse. Ownership would side with the millionaire guest, not the manager. He swallowed his pride. Very well. Emily, adjust your schedule. You'll attend dinner this evening. Emily gave a small nod, though her eyes lingered on Daniel's face, as if she could see the storm brewing behind his forced smile. That night, she arrived at Café Monarch dressed simply but with quiet elegance. Her presence drew attention even without luxury clothes. Victor was already waiting, a bottle of Bordeaux opened on the table. As they ate, he asked question after question, switching smoothly between French and English. Where did you study? What were your dreams before this? What would you do if money were no object? Emily answered honestly. Sometimes she laughed. Other times her voice turned soft. She spoke of her love for literature, her years studying international relations, how she had once dreamed of working for an embassy or a global nonprofit. But life had taken sharp turns, her scholarship lost, her mother's illness, until she had landed here, cleaning rooms. Victor listened intently. You carried disappointment with grace. That is rare. But tell me, Emily, do you ever regret it? Emily sipped her water before replying. Regret? Sometimes. But I've learned that people are more than their job titles. A maid can be a linguist. A manager can be insecure. A millionaire can be lonely. Titles don't tell the whole story. Victor chuckled. Spoken like a philosopher. Emily smiled faintly. Spoken like someone who's had to remind herself not to give up. Unbeknownst to her, Daniel had driven past Café Monarch that evening. He hadn't planned to stop, but something pulled him there. He parked across the street, engine off, staring at the restaurant's warm glow. Through the window, he could just make out Emily's silhouette, her gestures animated as she spoke, and Victor's attentive posture. Daniel's grip tightened on the steering wheel until his knuckles went white. He hated himself for spying, but he couldn't stop. He needed to know what was happening. Needed to know how much sway this Frenchman might hold over Emily, and by extension, over the hotel's perception of Daniel himself. Inside, the meal wound down with dessert and coffee. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. Emily, I want to recommend you personally to some of my business associates, people who can change your life. Will you allow me to do that? Emily blinked, surprised. That's generous. But I don't want to seem ungrateful to the hotel. They gave me a job when I needed it. Victor shook his head. Jobs like this keep you alive. But opportunities like these give you a future. Do not confuse the two. His words echoed inside her. She had always thought of her work as temporary, just a necessity. But the idea of stepping into something more, something greater, stirred feelings she had buried long ago. When she returned to the hotel later that night, Daniel was waiting near the staff entrance, pretending he'd been checking inventory. How was dinner? He asked, his voice tight. Emily studied him for a beat. Productive. He wants to connect me with people who could help my career. Daniel forced a smile, but his voice cracked. Be careful, Emily. Men like him don't give without expecting something in return. Her eyes narrowed. Maybe men like you think that way. But not everyone's motives are as shallow as you assume. Daniel flinched, the words striking deep. She walked past him without another word, leaving him alone in the dim hallway, realizing that for the first time in years, someone had seen straight through him. But the deeper Emily stepped into this new light, the more Daniel felt himself being shoved into the shadows. And that pressure was about to boil over. The next morning, sunlight poured through the glass doors of the Fairmont Grand, but Daniel felt no warmth in it. He sat stiffly in his office, scrolling through emails with a knot in his stomach. At the top of his inbox, one subject line made his blood run cold. Mr. Duval has spoken highly of a staff member, Miss Emily Carter. Please provide a detailed report on her role within the hotel. Daniel read it 3 times. Daniel's jaw tightened as he reread the message. They hadn't asked about his handling of Mr. Duval. They hadn't praised him for keeping the hotel's reputation intact. No, their focus was entirely on Emily. He shoved his chair back and paced the carpeted floor. He had built this career brick by brick, sacrificing weekends, relationships, even his health. And yet, in a matter of days, a maid had outshone him in the eyes of ownership. A knock broke into his spiraling thoughts. His assistant manager, Julia Marks, stepped in with a folder. Daniel, you might want to see this. Feedback from last night's guests. He snatched the folder and flipped it open. Several comment cards mentioned Emily by name. The young woman who spoke French was remarkable. She handled our questions with such grace. I've never seen a maid act with such professionalism. She should be running the place. Daniel slammed the folder shut, his chest tightening. Julia flinched. Sorry, he muttered, softening his tone. Thank you, Julia. I'll look into it. When she left, Daniel sank back into his chair, pressing his palms against his eyes. He was supposed to be the face of the hotel, the one who impressed the guests. And yet Emily was now being praised for skills he hadn't even realized she had. Later that afternoon, searching for coffee, he wandered into the staff lounge. Emily sat at a table with 2 housekeepers, laughing as she translated a note one of them had received from a French guest. The housekeepers watched her with open admiration, as if she were suddenly something more than just a peer. Daniel stood in the doorway unseen, listening. He said he was touched that someone actually took the time to listen to him. Emily explained gently. Sometimes that's all people want, to feel understood. The housekeepers nodded eagerly, thanking her. Emily smiled, not boastfully, but warmly, in a way that pulled people in without trying. Daniel cleared his throat loudly, making his presence known. Emily looked up, her expression calm as ever. Mr. Harris? Emily, he said, crossing his arms. I need a word with you. Alone. The housekeepers exchanged a look before slipping out. When the door shut, Daniel stepped closer. You're becoming quite popular with the guests. Emily tilted her head slightly. Is that a problem? He hesitated. It's not about problems, it's about balance. The attention is good for the hotel, yes, but it also raises questions. People might start to think you're more than what you were hired to be. Her eyes sharpened. And what exactly was I hired to be? Invisible? Daniel's lips parted, but no words came. Emily continued, her voice steady. I clean rooms, yes. I polish brass. But that doesn't mean I don't have value beyond that. You treat the uniform like it defines me, but it doesn't. Daniel's pulse quickened. That's not what I meant. Isn't it? Emily asked softly. You've managed this place for years, but you've never once asked about my background, my skills, my life. You assumed I was just another maid. Last night Mr. Duval didn't assume. He listened. The words hit like a blow. Daniel swallowed hard, his pride fighting with the truths she was throwing at him. He drew in a breath, trying to regain control. Emily, I appreciate what you did. But be careful. Attention like this, it can fade just as quickly as it comes. Don't let it go to your head. She studied him for a long moment, then stood. I'm not the one letting it go to my head. She walked past him, leaving Daniel rooted in place, her words echoing in the empty lounge. Hours later, Daniel sat at his desk again, staring blankly at the ownership email. He could write a glowing report about Emily, praising her skills and confirming what Victor had said. Or he could downplay it, making her sound ordinary, keeping the spotlight on himself. But every time he tried to type, her words cut through his thoughts. You assumed I was just another maid. He leaned back, closing his eyes, the weight of his own arrogance pressing harder than he wanted to admit. Meanwhile, the rest of the staff had begun to see Emily not as just a maid, but as something more. And soon, even guests would be asking for her by name. By the end of the week, Emily Carter was no longer just another housekeeper at the Fairmont Grand. Guests requested her directly, slipping her name onto comment cards, pulling aside front desk staff to say how impressed they were by her grace. Word spread quickly, not only among travelers but also through the staff. From bellhops to bartenders, it seemed every employee now carried a quiet respect for Emily. Daniel noticed it most during the Friday evening rush. A couple from Toronto approached the front desk, struggling with broken English to ask for directions. Daniel stepped forward, eager to handle it himself. But the wife smiled brightly and asked, "Excuse me, is Emily available?" The request hit Daniel like a slap. He forced a polite smile. "She's on another task. I can help you." But before he could continue, Emily appeared behind him, her uniform immaculate, her presence calm. "Bonsoir," she greeted warmly, slipping into their language with ease. The couple's faces lit up immediately. Within minutes, she had given them clear directions and even recommended a local cafe she thought they'd enjoy. They thanked her profusely, barely glancing back at Daniel. He clenched his jaw, pretending not to notice the dismissal, but the sting lingered. This was supposed to be his domain. Yet somehow Emily had become the face of professionalism in the hotel. Later that night, as Daniel made his rounds, he overheard two clerks at the desk whispering, "Did you see how easily she handled them? It's like she was born for this." "Yeah. Honestly, she's better with guests than Harris sometimes." Daniel froze just out of sight, his stomach twisting. He wanted to storm over, remind them who was still in charge. But instead, he walked away quietly, his footsteps echoing down the hallway. Emily, meanwhile, seemed untouched by the attention. She continued her duties steadily, cleaning rooms, organizing supplies, helping wherever needed. When guests praised her, she smiled graciously but never bragged. When staff leaned on her for help, she offered it freely. But the more she rose in the eyes of others, the more Daniel felt himself shrinking. The breaking point came Saturday morning. Ownership had sent a representative, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Vaughn, to check in on the hotel. Daniel met her at the entrance, determined to make a strong impression. "Mr. Harris," Patricia greeted briskly. "I've heard good things about your staff this week, particularly a young woman named Emily Carter." Daniel forced a smile. "Yes, she's been helpful." Patricia adjusted her glasses, scanning the lobby. "Helpful?" "Mr. Duval described her as indispensable." "That's not the same thing. Where is she? I'd like to meet her personally." Before Daniel could answer, Emily appeared carrying a tray of linens. Patricia's face lit up. "You must be Miss Carter," Patricia said warmly. "I've heard remarkable things. It's not often a maid becomes the highlight of a guest's stay. Tell me, how long have you been with us?" Emily shifted the tray to one arm and offered her hand. "A little over a year. It's been steady work. I'm grateful for it." Patricia shook her hand firmly. "Grateful? You should be proud. The way Mr. Duval described you, you have the skills of management. Have you considered moving beyond housekeeping?" Daniel's chest tightened. He jumped in quickly. "Patricia, with all due respect, Naomi's role here is important as it is. Transitioning her to management would leave a gap." Patricia raised a hand, silencing him. "I didn't ask you, Daniel. I asked her." Emily blinked, caught between them. "I've thought about it, yes. But right now my focus is on supporting my family. My mom's health makes it hard for me to think about career moves." Patricia's gaze softened. "Understandable. But talent like yours shouldn't be hidden. When you're ready, the company has development programs for staff exactly like you. Keep that in mind. Emily smiled politely. Thank you. I will. Daniel stood rigid at her side, his pride crushed. The representative hadn't come to check on him, she had come to meet Emily. After Patricia left, Daniel cornered Emily in the staff hallway, his voice low and sharp. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Emily frowned. What do you mean? You're undermining me, he hissed. This hotel doesn't run on one person's charm, it runs on structure, on order, on leadership. And that's me. Emily's expression hardened. I'm not trying to undermine you, Mr. Harris. I'm just doing my job. If people appreciate it, that's not my fault. Daniel stepped closer, his voice rising. You're turning staff against me. You're making guests think I can't do my job. Do you know what that does to my reputation? Emily's tone sharpened in return. Maybe your reputation isn't the problem. Maybe it's how you treat people. You only notice someone when they threaten you. That's not leadership, Mr. Harris. That's fear. The words struck like a hammer. Daniel froze, his mouth open but no response coming. Emily walked past him, her back straight, leaving him in the hallway with his pride in tatters. But that confrontation only widened the rift, pushing Daniel closer to breaking, and setting the stage for a clash the entire staff would soon witness. By Sunday evening, the tension inside the Fairmont Grand was impossible to ignore. Staff whispered about the manager's foul mood. Even guests picked up on the stiffness in Daniel's demeanor. Daniel's smile had grown tight, brittle. He barked orders at bellhops, corrected clerks over the smallest details, and prowled the hallways like a man waiting for an explosion. That explosion came just before dinner service. Emily had been assisting a couple from Quebec with their check-in, translating seamlessly while the front desk clerk entered their information into the computer. Her French flowed effortlessly, calming the nervous pair. The woman patted Emily's hand gratefully, murmuring, "Vous êtes marvelous." The moment Emily stepped away from the desk, Daniel intercepted her. His voice was low, sharp, his eyes flashing with suppressed rage. In my office. Now. She raised an eyebrow but followed without protest. Staff exchanged uneasy glances as the two disappeared behind the office door. Inside, Daniel shut it firmly and turned on her. Do you have any idea how this looks? Guests asking for you by name, ownership praising you like you run the place, while I'm treated like some background prop in my own hotel. Emily set down the clipboard she carried, her voice steady and respectful. Mr. Harris, I can't control how people react. I just do my job. He slammed his palm against the desk. Your job is cleaning rooms, Emily. Not running the front desk. Not charming millionaires. Not making me look incompetent. Silence hung in the air for a long beat. Then Emily stepped closer, her tone measured but firm. You're the one making yourself look incompetent. I didn't take your authority. You gave it up the moment you decided people like me didn't matter. Daniel blinked, thrown off by her directness. Excuse me? You never saw me, Emily said, her voice unwavering. Not once in the year I've worked here. You passed me in hallways, handed me schedules, maybe muttered a good morning when you felt like it. But you never asked about my skills, my background, or my story. You assumed a uniform defined me. That's on you, not me. Daniel's breathing quickened. He paced behind his desk, fists clenching and unclenching. Do you know what's at stake for me? Ownership is breathing down my neck. One mistake and I could lose everything I've worked for. And now you. He jabbed a finger toward her. You're becoming the star of the hotel. What am I supposed to do? Stand aside while a maid overshadows me? Emily's eyes flashed. Maybe you should. Because leadership isn't about keeping people beneath you. It's about lifting them up. If you can't handle that, maybe you're in the wrong job. The words landed heavy, filling the office like smoke. Daniel stopped pacing, his face pale, his chest heaving. You think you know everything, don't you? His voice was lower now, trembling at the edges. You think just because you speak a fancy language and a millionaire likes you, You understand what it means to run a hotel? You don't. You've never felt the pressure of ownership breathing down your neck, demanding perfection every second of every day. You've never had to answer for every mistake, every complaint, every broken detail. You think it's easy? You think I'm insecure? Maybe I am. But you have no idea what it's like to sit in this chair. Emily didn't flinch. You're right, I've never sat in that chair. But I know what it's like to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I know what it's like to be underestimated because of a uniform. And I know what it's like to have to prove myself every single day. So maybe I don't know your stress, Mr. Harris. But don't pretend you know mine. The office door swung open suddenly. Victor Duval stepped inside without knocking, his presence filling the room like a gust of wind. His sharp eyes moved between Daniel and Emily, sensing the tension that lingered like smoke after a fire. Ah, Victor said smoothly, switching to English for Daniel's benefit. Am I interrupting? Daniel stiffened. Mr. Duval, this is a private matter. Victor raised a hand. Nonsense. Nothing in a hotel is private. Everything affects the guest experience. And I must say, Mademoiselle Carter has provided the best experience I've had in years. Daniel's face flushed. With respect, Mr. Duval, this is still my hotel to manage. Victor stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. Then manage it. But do not diminish her. Without her, I would have walked out your doors the first night. Do you understand? The silence that followed was suffocating. Daniel felt his authority slipping through his fingers, yet he couldn't summon an argument. Emily spoke instead, her voice soft. Mr. Duval, thank you. But please don't make this about choosing sides. This is bigger than me or Mr. Harris. Victor studied her for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You are wise, mademoiselle. Perhaps wiser than your manager. Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to defend himself, but the words stuck. He lowered his eyes, shame burning hotter than any reprimand he'd ever received from ownership. But the confrontation didn't stay within those office walls. Once the staff caught wind of what had happened, Daniel's grip on authority unraveled faster than he could imagine. By Monday morning, word of the clash had already spread through the hotel. No one knew the full details, staff hadn't been in the room, but whispers carried fast. Bellhops swapped versions of the story in the service elevator. Housekeepers whispered over carts of fresh towels. Even bartenders shared their own take. The common thread was always the same. Emily Carter had stood her ground against the manager, and Victor Duval had taken her side. Daniel walked through the lobby that morning under the weight of every glance. Staff looked at him differently now, some with sympathy, others with curiosity, most with faint judgment. It was as if the invisible thread of respect that held his authority together had frayed overnight. He tried to project confidence, adjusting his tie, speaking briskly, issuing orders. But he saw it in their eyes. His words no longer carried the same weight. At noon, Victor requested a meeting in the lobby lounge. Daniel arrived to find Emily already seated across from him, a small notebook open in her hand. She looked professional, composed, more like an assistant manager than a maid. Victor greeted Daniel with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mr. Harris, please sit. We are discussing ways to improve the guest experience here. Daniel's jaw clenched, but he's Saturday. That's my responsibility. Victor leaned back, steepling his fingers. Yes. But your staff are your most valuable resource. And Naomi, pardon, Mademoiselle Carter, has ideas worth hearing. She told me about her work with international guests. Did you know she once volunteered at a cultural center, helping new arrivals adjust to life here? She understands hospitality at its core. Daniel's mouth went dry. He hadn't known. He'd never asked. Emily glanced at him, her voice calm but firm. I wasn't trying to undermine you, Mr. Harris. I was just answering his questions. Victor interjected. She does not undermine you. She elevates this place. If you cannot see that, then perhaps you do not understand leadership. The words hit like a hammer. Guests at nearby tables glanced over, sensing the tension. Daniel's face burned, but he forced his tone even. Mr. Duval, I appreciate your feedback. But this is an internal matter. Victor shook his head. When it affects the guest experience, it is not internal, it is fundamental. This hotel shines when Emily speaks, when she helps. That is the truth. Ignore it if you wish, but you will pay for that blindness. Emily closed her notebook, sensing Daniel's humiliation deepening. Maybe we should pause this conversation, she suggested gently. But the damage was already done. Daniel excused himself stiffly, retreating to his office. His reflection in the glass walls of the hallway showed a man on the edge of breaking. That evening, Patricia Vaughn, the representative from ownership, returned unexpectedly. Daniel scrambled to meet her in the lobby, desperate to salvage some dignity. But Patricia's first words crushed him. I've had several glowing reports about Emily Carter from guests, Mr. Harris. Even our corporate office has noticed. What exactly is your plan for her? Daniel swallowed hard. She's an excellent employee, but well, she was hired for housekeeping. Patricia frowned. And yet she is excelling in areas far beyond that. Don't you think it reflects poorly on you that a maid is outshining her own manager? The sentence landed like a blade between his ribs. He forced a smile. I'll review her role. Later that night, Daniel found Emily alone in the staff lounge, jotting notes into her notebook. He lingered in the doorway, watching her. She looked calm, focused, like she belonged to a world far beyond the hotel walls. Finally, he stepped inside. Emily. She looked up cautiously. Mr. Harris? Daniel sat across from her, his shoulders heavy, for the first time. Daniel's voice lacked its usual sharpness. You've made me see things I didn't want to. I've been so focused on protecting my position that I forgot what leadership actually means. It's not about control, it's about recognizing value, even when it comes from places you don't expect. Emily studied him for a long moment. That's true. He exhaled slowly. I've treated you unfairly. Dismissed you without ever realizing what you brought to the table. For that, I'm sorry. The words surprised even him. They tasted foreign, but at the same time, freeing. Emily closed her notebook and leaned back slightly. Thank you? But an apology only matters if things actually change. Daniel nodded. I know. And they will. Silence filled the space between them, not hostile this time, but fragile, as if something long broken had finally begun to mend. A truce, tentative but real. But Daniel's admission wasn't the end. His humility would face its final test when Emily's recognition became public, and ownership forced him to choose, fight her rise or help it. 2 days later, the Fairmont Grand hosted a small press event. Ownership wanted to highlight the hotel's commitment to excellence as part of their new branding push, and local media were invited to cover it. Daniel was supposed to be the face of the event, the steady manager representing professionalism. He ironed his best suit, practiced his talking points, even forced a smile in the mirror until it looked convincing. But when the event began in the gleaming lobby, it was Emily Carter the reporters wanted to talk to. Word of her handling of Victor Duval had traveled quickly, amplified by his glowing praise to ownership. He had even mentioned her in an interview with a French business journal, commending the young woman in Phoenix who saved an entire hotel with her kindness and fluency. As cameras flashed, Patricia Vaughn stepped up to the podium. She gave a short speech about the Fairmont Grand's values, then surprised Daniel by calling Emily forward. This hotel thrives because of people like Emily Carter, Patricia announced. She reminds us that talent is not limited to titles. Hospitality is about human connection, and Emily embodies that. Applause thundered across the marble floor. Emily looked almost startled, but she carried herself with calm dignity as she joined Patricia. A reporter immediately asked her a question in French, and she answered flawlessly, her voice steady, elegant. Camera shutters snapped in rapid bursts. Daniel stood off to the side, his carefully prepared notes crumpling in his hand. Every instinct told him to step forward, to reclaim the spotlight, to remind them he was the manager. But he didn't move. He stayed frozen, caught between pride and realization. When Emily finished, her eyes flicked through the crowd until they found his. For a brief moment, it felt as if the room had fallen away, leaving just the two of them. Later, after the reporters cleared out, Daniel found Emily alone in the staff hallway, leaning against the wall with her notebook. She looked tired but composed. "You did well," Daniel said quietly. Emily glanced up, studying him. "It wasn't about me. It was about the hotel." He nodded slowly. "That's what I've been missing. I kept thinking leadership was about guarding myself, protecting authority. But tonight I realized, it's about letting others shine when they've earned it." She tilted her head, curious. "Do you really believe that? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" Daniel let out a weary laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've wasted too much energy pretending. No. This isn't for you, it's for me. I can't keep leading the way I did. Fear isn't leadership. Pride isn't leadership. I see that now." Emily's voice softened, almost gentle. "Then prove it. Not with speeches. Not with apologies. With actions." Daniel met her eyes and nodded. "I will." And over the next week, he did something no one expected. He began to change. Instead of barking orders, he asked for input. Instead of dismissing staff, he took time to learn their names, their stories, their strengths. When Emily translated for another French guest, Daniel didn't bristle. He praised her openly, in front of everyone. Slowly, the mood in the hotel shifted. One afternoon, he called Emily into his office again. This time, the air felt lighter. He handed her a folder marked Development Program, Staff Advancement. "This came from ownership," he explained. "They want to offer you a spot. It's training for management. I recommended you." Emily blinked. "You recommended me?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Yes. Because you deserve it. And because the hotel deserves someone like you in leadership." She studied him for a moment, then allowed a small smile. "Thank you. That means more than you think." Daniel leaned back in his chair, exhaling. "Emily, you taught me something I should have learned a long time ago. People aren't defined by titles. Respect isn't earned by a suit or a nameplate, it's earned by how you treat others. I forgot that. But you reminded me." Emily closed the folder gently, her smile widening just slightly. "Then maybe we both learned something. You learned to see people. And I learned not to underestimate myself." The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was peaceful, almost like closure. That evening, as Daniel walked through the lobby, he noticed staff moving with more confidence, more ease. Guests smiled. The hotel felt alive again. And he realized it wasn't because of him, not directly. It was because he had finally stepped aside and allowed others to flourish. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to relief. Life has a way of humbling us when we think we're untouchable. Daniel Harris learned that leadership isn't about clinging to power, it's about lifting people up. Emily Carter learned that even if the world tries to keep you small, your worth can't stay hidden forever. Maybe that's the real lesson: never underestimate someone, and never let pride blind you to the value of others. So if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a time you were overlooked, or a time you misjudged someone, take it with you. Think about how you treat people in your daily life. Respect can change everything. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, make sure to subscribe. There's always another story waiting, one that just might change the way you see the world.